Hi there.
Hi, moving along. Just some old
Okay, so
karma
we just
come
want
to
to
haunt
catch
me.
up because I stopped. Oh, you had some karma visit you, did you?
Yeah, some old karma visit.
You're
Yeah,
quite okay. So
unresolved.
I've stopped the video, so I just want to reintroduce. So we're going to continue the conversation on the karma
Yes,
burns around the theme of ego death and what that might
yes, yes,
mean.
yes.
So want to just
Um,
start us off?
so I'm going to start again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, it really is around laying old stuff to rest, around old dysfunctional methodologies, old personalities that we've been in, that we used to be, that we were as a child in previous relationships, in relation to our parents, to our friends, to old workmates. They all know us in a certain way. And they often resist it when we want to change that because they're used to dealing with us as that. And they almost expect us to be in that role because this is the way they're used to dealing with us. Now, we don't always necessarily want to be the same person we were at, say, high school. We reserve the right to reinvent ourselves. And this is what Karma Burn is about. It's like laying a lot of that old stuff to rest, to like digging up the mud that's still clinging onto the human of us when we were 12 and like laying that to rest, bring up the memory that's actually stuck in that space, viewing it one more time, letting it wash away, and then saying, okay, well, now I no longer have to hold that particular thought or that particular form, and I can move into a completely new space. So, I mean, really what it's about is clearing the hard drive. It's clearing all the junk that we were and that we have been, and allowing space for us to become something completely different. Now, the Karma Burn is working on many layers on this. It's working directly with the Navaratna, which is designed to clear old patterning. It's working with the Iboga, which is clearing the family lineage stuff, our relationship to our past, to our parents, to our grandparents, to our great grandparents, to even further back potentially. And then the the turkey vulture, the Cathartes aura, which is designed to clear stuff around relationships. So it's actually looking at a whole range of different things that we need to clear, and to do it all at once is a very bold thing to do, which is why we've put in the Ganges water, the mother's milk, the emerald, um, and the rainbow, just to nourish us through this whole process, because it can be quite an intense process. Well, this karma bill is just going from strength to strength. I literally every day I'm hearing new accounts of people having radical experiences which we didn't expect, because we're looking at so much material. Now, a lot of people come up with the like, wow, it's been such a gentle process. Some has been quite intense, but on the whole, there's been a positive response in terms of people allowing themselves to let go of these things, revisiting old memory, and flush it away without it being a painful experience. Part of my personal mission is to move away from the heaviness of the processing and like the angst around the like, oh, I've suffered so much and I've got to go through so much to get rid of that suffering. For me, that's an outdated methodology. It's what I've tried to bring to the party here with the karma burn is a tool for anyone to allow that process to be more gentle, to be more pleasant, and even fun. I mean, for me, the first couple of times I took karma burn, a lot of the stuff that came up in my dreams was, oh, okay, here's so and so, just resolving old issues with them, and then I can actually lay it to rest. And just a sense when I woke up of like, okay, well, I don't have to go down that road again. That particular thread of resentment, or he done me wrong, or he stole my girlfriend 20 years ago and I'm still pissed off with him. That stuff, I can just lay it all to rest. It's like gone, and I can move on. It unbinds the other person from my field, so I'm not playing into their field, they're not playing into my field. I think I told you the story of this friend of mine I gave Karma Burnt to, who she hadn't seen this character in 20 years. She went out to Montague. She grew up in Joburg. She saw in Montague this guy appeared out of nowhere and like apologized for what he perceived as like having attempted to rape her 20 years ago while he was on Obex and alcohol. And in his deluded space, this has occurred. She had a completely different experience of it. She had actually thought he was gay, so she didn't even know what he was talking about. But he kept this memory for 20 years, but the memory was still lodged in her field, and the karma burn allowed that to come up for her to play it out. Now, I've had that kind of experience. I've had a lot of dream stuff coming up where you can play stuff out where the person is physically not in our reality. They might be like 5,000 kilometers away. So it allows you to play it out. And once the resolution's done, the Buddhists talk about giving offerings, and generally you'll give offerings in the physical format. You'll offer toma cakes, which are gift cakes, but to a particular deity in order to get the blessing from that. But they say if you can't do that, then just imagine it in your head. Do the offering in your head, and it's often even stronger if done in your head. So this is what's playing out here, the karma of our old memories being played out in dreams, allowing stuff to be let go, where we don't have the judgment around it. Because often in our daily lives, something comes up and we immediately jump on with a judgment. Oh, I'm still pissed off with that person. But in dreams, we don't have a lot of those screens. We can view it. It's like you can play these things out, and it's done. And we can move on. And that's really what the karma burn and the whole process of liberation is about. It's about moving on from the past, not being dragged down by a lot of the memory of the past, which is binding us into a particular form. Now, traditionally, they say that when you're going to do the enlightenment process, I mean, this is ancient Buddhist tech. They say go off to a cave, go to an isolated place where you can sit alone and play out the six realms. The six realms being hell realm, hungry ghost, animal realm, human, jealous god, and god realms. And the emotions associated with this would be hell realm would be anger, but anger once purified turns into clarity. Hungry ghosts, it's around not unsatisfaction, not being satisfied with what you get, but the wisdom energy of that is abundance, the ability to go out and to feel satiated, to feel full and feel content, and to go out and give boundlessly because you've got that sense in you. The animal realm is around ignorance. Now, like the dog not paying attention, walking into the street and getting hit by a car. The human realm is around, but the wisdom energy of the animal realm is intuitive wisdom, like knowing instinctively what needs to be done in that moment. Just like, I know exactly what I need to do now and doing it. The human realm, which is desire, and the moving through desire is like, well, I feel satisfied, so I don't desire anymore. So I do things out of a sense of abundance. I'm not driven like a beast to the field every day. The jealous gods, which is around jealousy, wanting something one doesn't have, wanting to storm heaven and take it by force. And the God realm, which is pride, which is that sense of, oh, I'm better than everyone. But the wisdom energy of that is the giving of blessings. They're like, okay, well, now I'm sitting in my kingdom, but I will give back to the world. So all of these potentially can be dealt with the whole karma burn bring up different aspects of these. I've watched as I've taken the karma burn, and a lot of it for me was around resentment, anger, the hell realms, the feeling unsatisfied, I watch each of these realms come up. Now, these realms are not physical realms, they're just states of mind, but they bind us as surely as, a chain would bind us. And this is why Buddha is saying, pointing at the wheel of reincarnation, saying like, get off the wheel, integrate all these aspects, be a god, be a demon, be a hungry ghost, be a jealous god, be an animal, integrate the wisdom of all of them. And once you've integrated it, then you can go into these states as your personal adornment. Then they become your fine feathers. Then you can go into a state of rage in that moment, do what needs to be done, and move out of it without carrying any karma. There's nothing impure in any state. It's just the holding onto it that causes the karma of in that moment. So this is what we're looking at with the karma burn. It's actually just moving beyond these states where we're conditioned by reality. We're not saying become like this Buddhist monk where we're sitting up in the mountain with no emotion. Not at all. We're actually saying the reverse, like go into the emotions, feel them. When hungry, eat. When sad, cry. When abide completely in whatever comes up, but don't hold on to it. Go into it, pluck the lotus from the water, but move on. Realize in the next moment the lotus might die, but there's another 1,000 lotus. And even if there's not, even if there's a sea of pollution, we will dance through the sea of pollution and move out the other side, not to be bound by anything. And this is the gift that karma burn gives, and to use it with this intention of like, okay, well, I'm not using it to free myself from karma so that I can be more free on the other side, to repattern, to reform myself, and to realize we have a million forms that you can be whatever you want and not to be bound by any form. This for me is the highest ideal, and because in a state like that, you come naked to every moment, you're fresh, you have the innocence of the child in every moment, you don't have the that when my child doesn't get something, she screams. And like, of course, you give it to her. But if you are in a state where you want something but you don't get it and you're not attached to it, it just passes through you. You move on, then the next moment gives you something else. This is the ideal state to be in. But still, to enjoy the chocolate ice cream as it arises from the fridge and you eat it, we're not talking about denying oneself any of the pleasures, just not being bound by them. The two things they say that cause suffering are desire and aversion. Now, desire for something, you want something and you get it, then you want more. And if you don't get it, you start to suffer. Aversion, you don't get something or you want to push something away and it comes to you, then you suffer because that particular horrible feeling you've been pushing away is now at your doorstep knocking. So these are the things we're looking at, and this is how the whole Buddhist thing plays in with the karma burn. Now, what we're looking at doing is they often talk about at the point of death or at death, they'll continue to read the teachings to people so they can have a chance of liberation in the bardas. The bardas are considered to be the spaces, the junctures after death where you can actually obtain liberation. And it's at each point it's saying like, don't follow after a particular ray of light. Don't follow after a particular desire. Otherwise, you'll be reborn as a creature in anger, whether it's human or not. I mean, that's really we don't know any of that for sure. But the point of death is very important because that mood is what you're going to carry forward. So whatever you're doing, just make sure at that point of death you're in a good space. Whatever you've
You're in
done
a good
before,
mood.
you're in a good mood, totally. Very important because you're going to carry that into the next form. Whatever the next form might be, whatever your view on the next form is, that is very important. So what the karma burn is looking at doing is clearing the slate. So we've actually dealt with a lot of the karma. So when we come to the point of death, we don't have this huge reservoir of like, oh, I've got karma with this person, or I wish I'd spoken to, Johnny who hit me with a stick when I was 12 and I've still got this anger towards him. We can play a lot of the stuff out with karma burn, play it out in our dreams. Maybe what's required in the dream is we get a bigger stick and we beat Johnny with the stick so we feel vindicated so we can let it go. So maybe not. Maybe it's just a question of forgiving him or realize that we also beat people with sticks at a certain point when we were younger. That might be the wisdom of the karma, but just to allow the emotional charge to release. This is what karma burn does, and it does it very gently. The Ganges water in there allows it just to flow away, to bring it up and flow, because a lot of the stuff can be quite intense. Now, everyone's reaction to karma burn is going to be different because everyone has a different set of karma. So their perception of it, their experience of it, all of it's going to be. Actually been amazed at the difference in responses that people have. I mean, I should have expected it given that people's karma is very different, but say their interaction to, for example, the energy of Iboga, which is the grandfather energy, that's going to be very different for each person. I think this might be what you've been experienced with the karma burn. For me, Iboga is I'm actually very good with the Iboga energy. It's very much an energy I resonate with. So there's no conflict there. For me, it's just the depth and the centering, the holding. That's what it brings to me. But once again, if there's work to be done there, it might come across as being quite dense or heavy. But so saying this, everyone is going to have a different experience.
Yeah, I'd like to say something about that a little bit, just in terms of my experience, because it was fascinating. It was like being with a spirit almost,
Mm,
like a deity. I definitely
mm,
had that kind of experience, and it was like, I mean, now that I'm through it and on the other side and feeling really so much better,
mm, mm,
honestly,
mm,
just really much better. Um, I can reflect a little bit, but there was a couple of things. The one is that I was absolutely not able to be in my head. So I think that I avoided stuff that was going on in the subconscious through the intellectual process, and that
Sure, sure.
absolutely got taken out. So much so that we could
Yes,
barely string a conversation together.
sure,
Um,
sure.
but it was almost like I was thinking about it this morning, the metaphor. It was like somebody had locked the door in the house, that I had stuff to deal with, and I had to stay in there until
Mm,
I dealt with it. And it was kind of
mm,
like going through this, dark home, where doors hadn't been opened and there was old stuff, and I had to kind of clean out in that way,
Yes.
clean house, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it so in that way it was, I mean, I can see now the absolute, unbelievable benefit of that, and I know
Mm. Mm.
through, my own teachings and understandings that, I mean, being, what could you say, a student of believing that we do reincarnate, or we can, choose our destiny, but we do need to clean up. We do need
Mm. Mm.
to have the charge released
Mm.
and
Mm.
do the homework.
Mm.
Um, but I think it can be quite scary sometimes, and at the time it can feel like a death. And I think that,
Mm.
it's obviously not a real death, but
Mm.
you probably go through similar transitions of consciousness and doorways and stuff like that
Mm.
when you die. But
Mm. Mm.
because when you die, everything that was suppressed and unseen and undealt with comes out
Mm.
to be reviewed.
Yes. Yes.
And I mean, I know that part of the work of deciding that you don't want to maybe reincarnate, or you maybe want to really be 100% in charge of what you do with your life, in the hereafter, or whatever your choice is that you do have to make sure that you're 100% clean,
Sure.
and that you're not coming back to finish old business that hasn't been
Mm.
dealt with and stuff like that, because
Mm.
that's kind of a natural law, and in our spirit
Mm.
we want to complete that, so
Mm.
we end up coming back for things,
Mm. Mm.
unconscious things.
Yeah, I mean, in
Yeah.
that sense, we kind of designed karma burn as like a universal solvent, to dissolve whatever needs to be dissolved. I mean, what you're talking about there with the being locked in the house and forced to deal with the rooms, that for me, when I took a big dose of the original of the iboga, which is, we've got just a potency in the bottle, so it's a lot milder. The big dose I took, it was very much, I was forced to, it just kept forcing me to deal with stuff. The issue of relationships came up, and it just forced me to view it again and again and again and again until I was like, I'll take, do whatever you say. I'll say yes, I'll say no. And it was asking me to choose, like, okay, more liberal relationship kind of paradigm, or a more monogamous one. And I was like kind of dancing between the two, not able to decide. And I forget the resolution. I think what the resolution was, just it brought the two very clearly to me and said, well, look, you can have one or the other, but to have both is not necessarily going to work. But I remember sitting there for hours and hours and hours lying on the floor, and it just forcing me to go over and over it again. And this is very valuable. Sometimes we just do need to be forced to look at something and say, okay, well, you're going to have to make a choice now. I'm not actually going to let you out of the loop until you do. And it's sometimes nice to have that control almost taken away from us, and being forced to just sit and deal with it, because then it's done, then it's dealt with. And that moment of death, then where everything comes up, we're kind of looking at a similar, it's not nearly as strong, of course, as that, but it's preparing people for that moment when they do die, so that when they actually get to death, a lot of the stuff has been washed away, and they actually don't have these. I mean, I've listened to a fair number of people who are dying, and a lot of it, what they want to do is to make peace with the people around them, to speak their peace, whatever their peace might be. Now, sometimes this is not possible. The people they want to make peace with have died, right? I remember when I took the iboga, I was actually finally able to make peace with my mother, who, when she died, we'd been in a bit of a strange interaction with each other, but I was able to make peace with her in that iboga experience. And after that, I could feel her beaming down on me positively. It was a huge weight off me, and it allowed a lot of my energy that had been tied up in like worrying about what our interaction had been. It allowed me to move that energy into a whole range of different stuff. What a blessing, and also to feel that I had her blessing completely. That experience was incredibly valuable. If that was the only thing I took from the experience, it was well worth the experience. Although I got a whole lot more from it. But
Mm,
yeah, I mean, this is one of the powers of this one substance. I
mm,
mean, the Navaratna is a huge player in itself. I mean, that's specifically designed for this, designed by an enlightened alchemist to unbind particular karmas. So it's
mm.
like it's a work of high art, this karma burn. But it's not for people who aren't serious about the whole process. But I would argue that everyone's going to die. Fact, right? One way or another, even if they go body of light, they're going to die. going to dissolve, they're going to dissolve or break down or die, is, or to be able to have a conscious choice, is if they've cleared a lot of the stuff. Now, this is where karma burn comes in. A lot of the practices, the yoga, the meditations, the body therapy, I know a lot of the Ramtha stuff is around, working with this stuff, pre-death stuff. But it's nice to have a substance which, a friend of mine, one of the other medicine Buddhas, the Karma Buddha, he's like, "Oh, I'm lazy. I just want to take a pill and have it done for me. I don't want to do the work." And this is what this represents, to they actually put a charge in the body to actually flush stuff out. Now, obviously, doing it with practices or with support or with a crucible to protect it will accelerate the process and amplify it. Like any working with any medicinal plants, it'll be the same level of protection around you, just to accelerate the process. So it's a very exciting time, all in all, for everyone. And I hope everyone who's doing your course, has a great time doing it. And I can pretty much guarantee everyone will have a completely different experience, because there is so much individual variance, with the substances in the mix and in people's individual karma. And I would argue your experience with it is that particular avoidance of the iboga thing was like maybe the intellectualization of the stuff is an offense against dealing with some of the junk. And I mean, it's one we all share. It's one that's a strong one of mine as well. I know it well. That's why I can empathize. But it's nice when the grandfather kind of just takes us like, okay, look, well, we're going to learn how to chop wood today, and we're going to do it till you get it right, yeah, or we're going to learn how to, lay this particular pipe in the house, and if it takes us 50 years, you'll do it till you get it right, and then you'll know how to do it. And this is what this represents. It represents that energy and that relentlessness and that patience and that much
Yeah,
compassion.
and it's also interesting to think about the symptomology, like I said to you, of the grandfather and what that, so there's the lineage bearing of what it is that the ancestral propensities, in a way, that you get born into. So my grandfather died of kidney failure,
Mm,
and
mm,
my
mm,
one of my initial experiences of the remedy was a lot of grief,
mm,
and a lot of there was a lot of pain in the kidneys, and
mm, mm,
and but it was just interesting because I did feel like there was ancestral stuff being cleared for sure.
mm,
And
mm,
what has happened to me is that it's not so much about thinking about what this new life should be or what the new earth should be. It's more just like that the ability to judge where I am has almost dissolved. So in other words, I'm not separating things out so much anymore. I'm not saying, I have to be like this or I have to be like that. I'm just less judgmental, and there's a lot more of a transparent field around me. So it was almost like there was this whole um, sort of, I don't know what you would say, but it is that spiritual detoxification. But it's like this
mm,
energetic dumping into the system,
mm,
into the body,
mm,
from
mm.
all of these emotions, and carrying, things and groups and my own
Mm.
experiences, and kind of almost
Sure,
like
sure.
holding it energetically in my
Yes,
frequency, in
yes,
my electromagnetic field. And
yes,
I think
yes.
that what happened, the reason why the karma burn was so hard for me at first, was because I was just holding so much. A lot of
Mm,
it wasn't
mm.
mine.
Yes, yes,
Clearing out my field of my clients and my work and
yes.
groups and
Sure.
everything. It was like, I don't know
Yes,
what kind of
yes.
field needs to be blown away, but I feel much better, and absolutely like appreciative of the fact that, as we feel something, and even as we're clearing stuff, we dump it
Mm,
into our bodies, and
mm,
our bodies do need
mm.
the opportunity to flush it out.
Yes, yes. And I mean,
Otherwise it's like, yeah, go for it.
this brings up a very interesting point around the sort of perceived obligation we have around carrying people's fields, or like being responsible for groups, or in your case working a lot with groups, that perception on your part of, I need to hold this. And I mean, maybe temporarily for the time you do need to hold it, but you also need to drop it afterwards, because otherwise it just becomes this chunk that gets attached to your field, and it'll slow you down. And it's, it's almost like one of the aspects of, I don't know, I call it idiot compassion, but I call it this because we perceive it's like we need to do it, but it is actually not doing anyone any good. We're holding it, we're holding that, but it's not allowing them to move forward. It's not allowing us to move forward because we're still holding this. It seems like a compassionate and good thing to do, but actually it's in this case it's not very beneficial for you. It might be beneficial for them, but I mean you're
In the
still
short
holding
run,
that
in the
in the
short
short
run,
term. In the
because
short term, very necessary to
in the
do that.
long
In the
run,
long
you
run,
have to
it's
have it
done.
back. Yeah.
Everyone, yeah, must row their own boat to shore. Sure, you can help them in the water or drag them onto the boat, but I mean, they must row it. And holding people, if you're trying to save too many people in the water, they'll just drown you eventually. But you can give them assistance onto the boat, but too many people get on the boat sinks. But I find this a lot with therapists, and I've had to deal with it in myself as well. This sense like, oh, I need to hold this person, and I came to the conclusion a while ago that it's like the best thing I can do is just to hold them in the moment, but then completely let it go, so I can arrive fresh to each moment. And I think this is it's a subtle trap a lot of therapists face because it's a perceived, it almost becomes an ego thing. It's like, oh, I'm holding their space and blah, 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 blah. And in
Definitely.
the moment, you do need to, but afterwards, it's not helping them or you. But to just have this laid down, to be able to let it go without like, oh, I just don't have to hold this pack anymore. It's not benefiting them or me. And,
Right.
I'll be more able and functional with them in that moment if I'm not holding previous baggage because I can bring more to the party in that moment. My CPU is not tied up, doing some accounting package in the background. It's full. All its activity is right front and center right now. So this is, I mean, like I said, it's the karma burns a mirror. It is a mirror, but it's a compassionate mirror. And
Yeah, and
working
I
with
think,
the
sorry, am I interrupting you? I just want to
no,
say,
no, go for it.
I think, there's something very, very interesting, just in terms of the way that as people are doing this work and they're moving into more conscious ideas, I'm much more aware of the fact that obviously there's I mean, there's a continuity of consciousness. There's a continuity of consciousness beyond our physical death. So
Mm,
if we die, we're not gone.
mm, mm, mm.
If we leave the physical body, but there's
Sure.
also the opportunity, as we move towards a kind of a more enlightened choices, that we reincarnate. I mean, it's one of the terms that is used at the school, that we reincarnate within the same life, kind of idea, that we keep reinventing ourselves and we keep letting go and kind of dying to old identities, and and following this kind of highest excitement or joy or whatever of
Mm, mm,
whatever's next. And if we truly are reinventing ourselves and we are following our joy, for one, you don't age. You kind
mm,
of become
mm.
this living immortal,
Yes,
in a
yes,
sense. And that's
yes,
kind of the high alchemy as well.
yes, yes.
Because these alchemists that are living,
Mm,
thousands and thousands of years,
mm,
well,
mm,
I mean, they talk about the elixir of eternal life and
mm, mm,
this, monatomic gold
mm,
at a high spin level. That's
mm.
the elixir that does it. But
The
what is it?
monatomic gold is actually in the Navaratna, by the way. Yeah, it's actually in one of the ingredients in the Navaratna. Yeah, so that's in the remedy as well, the monatomic gold. Now, but what I wanted to address here, I mean, it's interesting you brought this up, but that the sense of immortality is, I would argue, one of the things that cause us to age is the baggage which is dragging us down and slowly causes the cells to break down. That's really what's telling us to it's not telling us to age, but we just become so burdened by the past and so weighed down. You look at like 6-year-olds and 8-year-olds, they're bouncing around, they're cruising, but it's not just the age thing. It's their minds are free. They're not carrying all this mental junk. That's why we slow down. It's not
Mm.
that okay, we're now 40 or 50 or however old we are. I mean, it's just a number. It's a state, but it's like we've got 40 or 50 years of accumulated stuff. But if we're not playing with 40 or 50 years of accumulated stuff, we're not dealing with that stuff. If it's gone, then we really have the mind of a 4 or 5 or 6 and 8-year-old, like trying to keep up with my 2-year-old. Yeah, mission. I'm exhausted.
Yeah,
But
boundless
it's
energy.
boundless energy. Why? Because they're here, front and center, present and aware. They're not carrying oh God, and I've got to do that, and then an obligation, and then I've got to see this person, and it's like, and even that is a pattern of feeling obligated to stuff, and if you turn that around, then it becomes, well, okay, what's the adventure for today? Okay, I've got to do all these things, but it's going to be fun. It's not going to be seen as a job or work or responsibility or weight. All of these are concepts we've loaded onto it, but I would argue that the first step in like repatterning that is one has to clear that stuff out. You know, a lot of the old memory around that, a lot of the pain, the hurt, the old relationships with people, friends, lovers, parents, you know, all of that needs to be cleared. Grandparents, I mean, all of that needs to be cleared. And once we've cleared that, then we've actually at a good starting place. Then we can actually, okay, now what do I actually want to imprint onto this new clean space? You know, it's like the whole idea of an etch a sketch. It gets covered over with stuff. And but once you scrape the thing across, it clears the screen. You've got a blank canvas. This is what we're looking at the blank canvas to write something new on. And realize we can delete it and write something new at any moment. And we're never going to go into a state of loss because we have endless creativity, boundless. We can always we need a new idea, we'll come up with a new idea. Well, there's 10 new ideas sitting just waiting to come down the tube. So there's never a sense of lack or loss or I've got to hold this idea for myself because if I give it out, I'm going to lose it. There's about a million more waiting to come onto the plate. So what the mission I see with Karma Burn is just to clear out the space so that this pristine tabula rasa, blank slate space is there for us to imprint every day and then clean off the next day. It's not a question of losing or creating this masterpiece. We create a masterpiece, we'll create another masterpiece. You know, I consider Karma Burn an act of high alchemical art. But I mean, it's just the first of many. We've got a whole another range of stuff coming down the tubes. It's our first medicine, but it's first creation. But we'll have others, and they will be equally as fine for different situations. And I think a lot of them will be around the re-imprinting phase or the playing consciously with a lot of these things. So I mean, it's a very exciting time. You know, it's really looking at a. I don't even use the corny word like a spiritual supplement, but it's like the tools with which people working with awareness can actually alchemically bring physical tools in and use them as an adjunct to whatever else they're doing so that they don't have to sit, say, for 10 years in meditation. You know, I mean, one of our taglines for Karma Burn is like deeper than meditation or deeper than therapy, faster than meditation, deeper than therapy. We've had a couple of, yeah, we're going to put cheaper than therapy, but which is true too. But you see, it's an adjunct to that. We don't want to people think, oh well, this is saying you don't need some form of therapeutic process. It's all valuable, but we can all do with some help, and this is what Karma Burn comes in as. This is an add-on for people to use in conjunction with therapy or by itself. And I would say the people doing it by themselves just have some good conscious intentions around what they want to let go because the remedy will work with that. It'll take that and run with it. Especially the iboga because the iboga is it's a live creature. It's a living thing and it is intelligent. So it'll work
Yeah, that
with
was
what
my
you want to work
experience.
with. Yeah.
Definitely. And I actually felt like, because I mean, there's a couple of things to say. The one, and I want to just come say them and then come back to the live intelligence. But the one thing is around the repatterning.
Mm.
Um, and that removing of the crusts of the old personality, shutting down the windows of the past, those
Mm.
kind of things, all those things that
Mm.
were open, never
Mm.
complete. And so,
Mm.
how can we reboot when we're stuck?
Yes.
Um, so I was going to say there was a couple of things about that. The one is that it's almost like this. I get this sense of like a volcano. Like we have this sense of self that arises, that's fresh, and like there's fire and there's raw energy coming from the center always, but we kind of get crusted over. And if we don't move out of those crusts and let that raw sense of self come through from the center, then we don't ever have that new energy coming from within us.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
the
Yes.
one
Yes.
thing. And
Mm.
often, we identify with the crusts on the top.
Sure.
Like this is me, and this is me, and this, because we're so used to the
Sure.
window of perception out of which we're
Sure.
walking.
Sure.
Um, that when that piece floats off, you think that that's you and that's where you're just going, when actually no, you should stay right there where this volcano is coming up.
Yes.
So that was the one thing I was going to say. Oh, another
And I
thing.
mean, that's the part of the ego death people experience. Yeah, the crust shedding. I mean, it's a much clearer image, actually. It's a nicer image, the shedding of the crust, about our attachment to the crusts.
Right.
But I mean, beautiful that we can do that. I
And
mean, the
and
one
that
thing I
it's
wanted to
also
add,
like
just
that.
quickly,
It's like that. There's so much
just
to
quick one
say in
thing.
this
Yeah, no,
privilege.
just one thing I want to add is that people worry about how to reinstall on the other side, but this is an auto reinstalling thing. It'll reinstall itself. It's useful to give it some new programming as it's auto reinstalling, but once we clear the space, it'll reinstall anyway. Yeah. But obviously, the more good stuff we put in at that point, the better the installation will be, the more stable it will be.
Mm. Yeah, I was just going to say something about as you work through those things, which may have actually been original defenses. So some of like for me, there was some childhood wounding stuff around attachment and loss of my father and that kind of male
Sure,
wounding thing.
sure.
Is that if we get pushed through that to the other side, there's
Yes,
actually some kind of natural reattachment that I found to happen. It was
yes,
quite stunning. I was just being loved through this and like taken care of, and people were there for me
yes,
and loving me, and it was just very, very sweet. So,
yes,
um,
yes.
in family constellations, they call it interrupted reaching out, where, the child runs up to the parents with their arms open and then the parent is not there. So that
Mm,
shows, and they continue that pattern throughout their life. They get more and more
mm,
sophisticated in that
mm,
way of covering. And so I think one of the
mm,
deaths, in a sense, in the process can be the covering, like what you've been covering can't be covered anymore because there's something underneath that needs to be worked through and resolved. So that's just one of the things that I wanted to say. That's kind of, in a
mm,
sense, the underworld work,
mm, mm,
the
mm,
hurts, the stuff that we normally want to keep in the dark, and
mm,
vulnerability sometimes, that sits below
mm,
the conscious
mm,
awareness.
mm,
So that was the one thing that I wanted to say, and the other thing, and that this sense of self arising, or natural sense of life or whatever arising is
mm,
um, that I think that we. I mean, I'm not sure what you think of this, but I think that there's like just new information coming in and new identity opportunities and new definitions of self available for people. So,
mm, mm,
even if you
mm,
don't know who you are or who you're
mm,
becoming,
mm,
if you just sit in that gap for a while,
mm, mm.
I think new ideas are sort of coming our way.
It's interesting because one of the things, I mean, I keep going on about iboga, but it's a really miraculous substance. But one of the things it's given as an initiation drug or substance, entheogen, to even children as young as between 6 and 13. The young male boys are given it in Gabon. I mean, the women don't necessarily take the big dose because they consider the women don't necessarily need to do that because they already know their purpose. This is their view. But the young boys take the iboga in order to find their purpose in life. So the plant gives them, okay, well, this is what you should be doing with yourself. And that makes it a lot easier because then they know, like, well, actually, there's no point in me trying to be a builder when I'm actually an artist. And so I'm going to spend all my energy on becoming the artist, which I've always felt an inclination to, but my father's a builder, he wants me to be a builder. So it's actually saying we trust the plant to actually show us what our own nature is. So that's where it's like a mirror. It's like, well, this is who you are. And it's very much like the grandfather observing the boy. It's like, well, that boy's really good he likes to carve, make sculptures. So let him be a sculptor, let him be an artist instead of like forcing him to be a builder. This is one of the things that like the purpose in life that I know a lot of people struggle with, like the what should I be doing with my life? And the iboga represents one of the tools to actually show you where you should be going because it's very confusing. I mean, I didn't know what I wanted to do for a long time when I was younger. It's like, wow, we're thrown out this whole panoply of different options. Oh, or lack of options. Or you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, you can be a blah 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 blah. But what if I don't like those options? What if I want to do something else? And there are not that many rock star slots out there, so it's like unless you're really talented or you're really lucky, you're not necessarily going to get one of those either. So it's for people to have that instinctual knowing of what they actually want to do, but a realistic knowing, not a knowing that's sort of conditioned by MTV and what we see around us. That's very important for people. I mean, even for children. And in the West, there are not that many initiation rituals for the children going from child to adult. That 13-year-old thing. I mean, certain cultures have it, but the iboga is given at that juncture. It's like it's a 5-day initiation, and they get made to eat it and then walk it. And so by that time, they've gone through a major transition, and they've been given their life purpose by themselves. The plants showed them their reason for being here, which makes it a lot easier. It's like, okay, well, now I know I should be an artist. So I'm going to spend all my time and energy focused on being that, rather than going to law school because this is what my father wants me to do. That is just wasted time. And I mean, I've heard so many stories in practice of people where this is just the case. They've spent so much time on stuff they weren't supposed to be doing, and they've gone three-quarters of the way through it and decided there's no way they could be a lawyer. They just can't do it. And now there's back to square one. Now they're looking again. But if that time had been spent, actually pursuing what they were doing, they'd be much happier at this point. So if Iboga brings this to the party, I mean, brilliant. Just that alone, huge, huge,
Yeah,
huge.
I think that that's very valuable, and that is definitely one of the things that I wanted to ask you about because, it's like, well, how can you consciously engage the spirit of these remedies that are working with you? And so, I think at some point I sort of just realized that it's like, the more I understand that this is what's going on for me, the more I can actually say, okay, just clean out my body, show me the way, like, I'm
Mm,
just going to let go, like you say, like a big
mm,
surrender.
mm, mm,
Um, and and actually, in some ways, walking my power also helped me. So as I
mm,
moved towards, okay, I have always been a powerful individual, that also seemed to kind of help the energy move, and so I invite other people to do that as well, if that's right for them. But yeah, it's pretty spectacular, I have to say. Pretty spectacular.
One of the stories that kind of plays in here quite strongly is, I don't know if you know of the descent of Inanna.
Mm. Of
The story
course.
goes that, of course,
Jeez,
no, of
I've
course,
just
but I
been
mean,
through it
no, no,
myself.
no, for sure. But I mean, it's literally she takes off all her jewelry as she descends to the underworld, and then she's bound in the underworld naked. And her reascent is about taking back all her adornments. But she almost has to come naked to the party without anything and experience this human form without her powers, and then be strong enough in that powers back on as adornments. But she has to trust enough in the process to let go. And part of this is the letting go, a lot of the ego stuff around, oh, but I don't want to lay this down because then I'll be vulnerable. Yes, one has to be vulnerable, but what try to do with Karma Burn is to allow that laying down of the past without the ego going into like radical clinging or desperation, and realizing, well, a lot of this is just that memory of, when I, fell off a horse when I was 12, and it was really sore, and I became fearful of horses after that, and then I got a bit anxious whenever I was in a car after that. All that was that whole situation not being resolved at the time. If someone had put me back on a horse straight away, this wasn't me, but I'm just an example, then it wouldn't have occurred. But because there was pain and fear associated with it, and people around me didn't work with that, then that fear is still there. And this is just an analogy of one example of what might have occurred in life. Now, pain is obviously physical pain is a huge binder, because in that moment of pain, I mean, there's certain cultures when they teach someone an important lesson, they'll give them a big smack so that it actually gets encoded with pain. Now, I'm not proposing this as a methodology. I'm just demonstrating an example of how the organism learns. This is, if we have a negative experience and it's painful, this becomes encoded as a life lesson. We don't consciously take it on, but it's subconsciously we remember this as like, oh, pain equals, oh, when I got caught stealing my father's pastries from the fridge. Okay, this was a painful thing. Now, then the whole thing around acquiring pastries becomes a painful thing, and it all gets messed up and convoluted, and it just turns into this big mush. And what we're looking at here is like not looking at everyone's individual karma, just saying, okay, here's a flush, here's a universal solvent, just to like clear the stuff away, so we can actually have the clean slate. Which, I mean, there's a line from Bugsy Malone, and he says, "Well, everyone deserves a second chance, or a third chance, or a fourth chance, or a fifth chance. Why should we be limited to two chances? Like, okay, well, let's have a clean slate and let's try it again, and let's realize the Tibetans don't have a word for bad or wrong. For them, the closest they have is something that could have been done better. Now we realize, okay, we do it, and it's like, okay, I did it, but I could have done that better. So next time, no guilt, no blame, no judgment, but next time I'll do it better. Why? Because it's my point of art to do it better. I want to create myself as a more elegant solution, as a more beautiful manifestation of myself to myself and to the people around me. This is my gift to the world, and if Karma Burn can be instrumental in actually helping this, well, phew, wow, brilliant, then Medicine Buddhas as a company, just in bringing this product alone to the world, has done what it intended to do. And we didn't lightly take on this name. It's like we take it on with full responsibility of everything that's entailed. I mean, it's always been my mission personally to benefit sentient beings, but like working with a crew, and we work very well together as a crew to actually bring these frequencies. And the Medicine Buddha mantra is in this remedy, in Karma Burn, and we all chanted it into a bowl, the 108 repetitions, with the intention of removing disease. Now, disease is just stuck karma, which is what we're looking at dealing with here. So we're hitting the whole karmic accumulation things from many angles here. So it's like no one's gonna get through this without shedding some skin. But we really designed it. I mean, I'm more of the gung ho school, but the other two in the medicine, but they were like, no, we must make it more gentle. And I appreciate that because we've all been through enough suffering, we've all been through enough pain, and now is a time to just do it gently, so we can actually enjoy the process as we go. I mean, I remember the first couple times I took Karma Burn, waking up like, oh wow, that was actually really gentle. I'm more of the hardcore manifestation. I like it to hurt, like to bite through my arm a bit. But not everyone's like that, and I respect that. And this is what Karma Burn is there for. But it's got enough heavy hitters so that it's not going to be a lightweight either. Like your own experience with it, it's been very interesting to me because I see the iboga playing in very strongly. That being stuck in the house and being forced to look at each of the grungy rooms. I mean the
Definitely, it was absolutely like that. And I definitely, it's fascinating for me. It's like these themes of death so have been, coming up, and I just think that it is an important theme to be working with. Because it does amplify stuff out of the psyche. And so it's almost like, the Grim Reaper or whatever was in my home, like,
Yes, yes, coming to collect back rent.
yeah, sweeping, 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 and like saying, I'm here, and in a way, I know, through various spiritual disciplines that, yes, there is death, but it doesn't have to be a physical death. But your
Mm,
physicality is something that needs to be transmuted.
mm,
And our absolute identification with our physical body and all that sort of stuff is not a small piece of work
mm,
to let
mm,
go of. The fact that, in alchemical processes, they call it the emerald tablet, actually, the
mm,
7 steps to personal transmutation.
mm,
A big part of it is the separation from the identity and moving into
mm,
this high spin self, which is
mm,
basically just consciousness into form,
mm, mm, mm,
in any direction.
mm.
And those of us that are on the spiritual journey, I mean, it's like for me having this spiritual ego, in a sense, that thinks I'm so far along, is the first thing that has to go.
Yes.
It's
Yeah,
like,
but I mean, this is an interesting point here. I'd like to address this briefly because I think there's a fair amount of not confusion on this, but everyone's like, "Oh, slay the ego, slay the ego." Yes, there is the aspect to that, but I mean, part of the the Buddhist thing is this all victorious confidence. Like, I know, and I know that I know, and I'm not going to hide under the covers or pretend I'm less than I am. I'm not going to be particularly egotistical about it, but they talk about doing the lion's roar, like roaring at the heavens to announce that you've arrived. They're like, I know, I understand the nature of reality. It doesn't mean my journey is ended. It means now I'm signing up, now I'm playing properly. So it's like,
So
I've often,
that's a different self though that's speaking. That
sure,
is
sure,
not the
sure, sure.
small self, that is not the self that is afraid, that is not the self that can't see anything.
Mm,
That's a transcendent self
mm,
in a
mm.
way that has
Sure, but I mean that transcendent self is right there in you now. I mean that is
right.
there. That's
No, I
part of you.
know.
Yes,
And it is
yes.
complicated, and I do encourage people to like go deeply into paths and lineages because, some people will say have one concept and someone else will use the concept in a completely different way. And, in a way, people have to get on board with their own concepts and see their path right through to the end of the experience to what the actual wisdom was trying to say in the first place. Because
Mm,
the last thing we need is like a concept war, you know what I mean? Around like getting stuck. But I think it's important that people do know that, like, some people will say ego and mean one thing, and someone
yes,
else will
yes,
say ego and mean another thing. And
yes.
and actually, it's really, really
Mm,
important, that we have a concept of what that is. Like,
yes.
you know, at the school that I go to, we work a lot with neurological patterning. So we'll say, okay, what is it that you'd like to create? Like up
Mm,
until now, you've been the sum total of your product, of your environment,
mm,
your parents, your people, places, things, times, and events that are around you. And you've got this neurological window of patterning
mm,
that you're engaging through your thoughts and your actions
mm,
every day, and
mm,
basically that's your identity, and that
mm,
is to some extent your ego.
mm, mm,
And that if
mm.
you want to reinvent yourself, you have to in a way die to that identity or let it
Yes,
dissolve even
yes.
chemically, and
Mm,
shut down that window of perception and the way that
mm,
you're looking and engaging the world,
mm.
and open it up to something else. And through
Yes,
that, then
yes.
you can download, infinite opportunities, because we actually are, this observer looking through this window of ego, which can essentially be anything we want it to be.
Sure,
So
sure.
I guess you can have this,
I mean, can I give you my take on the ego? Because
yeah,
I mean, I deal a lot with, I mean, as a homeopath, I deal a lot with, in the sense, ego, but for me, all it represents is probably about 7 or 8, maybe 10 homeopathic patterns, all strung together and kind of stuck together with chewing gum, and like it assumes an identity because of that. But a lot of these patterns are just dysfunctional or even possibly functional responses to a traumatic environment. So, for example, if someone's pattern in their past included being hurt a lot and their response was to get angry as a response, that anger is then a remedy. It has a name. The name is Nux Vomica. It's, for example, it is a remedy. It is a space, and when you give this remedy to the person, they stop getting as angry whenever they feel vulnerable. It's these. There are definite solutions to even these ego formations. They're not. It's not even as real as we think it is. It's just neurotic, or I don't even want to use the word neurotic because that gives the wrong thing. Sometimes they were appropriate. Sometimes we needed these patterns to help us survive. But the more we stay in a particular pattern, the more it becomes habitual behavior. Then we think it's us. If every time someone pisses us off, we get angry, then it's become such a knee-jerk reaction that we can't switch it off even when we want to. And then something silly occurs, and then we just get angry, and it's like, oh, why are we getting angry? Oh, this is my pattern. But if you can take a remedy and that pattern can disappear, how real is the ego anyway? How real is it if you can give a substance which is diluted 10 million times and it can take that away? How seriously can we actually take the ego? Sure, it's a serious thing, but it also, for me, it takes a lot of the pain away. It's like, okay, well, I can't take myself that seriously. I can take this remedy and like, oh, well, that pattern's no, I'm not playing that movie anymore. Like, how real was it to begin with? It's a frequency shift which we went into as a survival mechanism, which then becomes habitual behavior. We put on the raincoat because it was raining. We went out, it protected us from the rain, but now we're inside and we're sweating. Why are we sweating? Because we still got the raincoat on. And it's like, Why do you have the raincoat on? Oh, because I need it. No, but it's not raining anymore. No, but I need it. And if you can just give a remedy to the person which is, okay, you can take the raincoat off, which is what the remedy does, then they take it off and then they realize, well, they've always got the raincoat in storage somewhere and they can put it on when they need it. This is what we're talking about, freedom from our previous conditioning, not being bound from habitual behavior. You know, the
And I
dog is
think that,
always,
yeah,
yeah?
I think that that process of, you know, 'cause some people, I think we also call it the personality, and it's kind of like in psychology, I think they differentiate. They call the ego is kind of like the part that takes the energy coming in and kind of like it's kind of the coordinator. It's almost like the parent of
Mm,
the self. It kind
mm,
of does, you know, brings in energy, organizes it, and then gives it to the inner self or whatever. It does that
yes.
coordination. Um, so if you want a strong ego, it's almost like you have to have a strong internal, healthy, functioning parent. I mean, that's just another model. It's just another possibility, a thought.
Yes. Yes.
But what I was going to say is that, you know, as we get used to this idea that we are not our personalities, we're not our name, we're not our body necessarily, we're just having the experience of it, and that it's not stuck, it's not fixed.
Mm,
You
mm,
can, you know, start to transition into new concepts and paradigms of self. And,
mm,
you know, it's almost like training wheels, you know, how,
mm,
okay,
mm.
so most people, a lot of people don't even realize that you can consciously intend
Yes,
a
yes,
personality or
sure,
even an experience for themselves, and that you
sure.
can start to take the self and mold it into something
Mm,
greater and more expansive, so that
mm,
the way that you
mm,
observe energy coming in
mm,
is according to what it is that you want, you know.
mm,
So
mm. You know,
yeah,
a very interesting analogy just came to me of when you paint a room, you know, it's like you can paint over just the existing paint, but it's useful often to sand it down a bit just to clear all the old bits of paint so they're not getting layered on top of that. And really, this is what the karma burn is doing. It's like saying, okay, we're just going to give the room a sand. What you choose to paint it afterwards, your own business. It's not our business. We're just in the cleaning the debris off the surface so that a new imprint can be allowed to form. And it's I think this is why a lot of the
I
conscious
thought it was
intention
more like
stuff
blowing up the house and rebuilding
well,
an
you
old
blow up the
place.
house. I'm just using different analogies here so people can see it in different ways. But
It's like
I
you
think
built your house on ancestral grounds. Now get out.
no, I think it's more like the grim sweeper is coming there to sweep out the house because you stuffed it
Let's have
so
a look
full of
at the
old.
spirits that are underneath this house.
Well, that too, yeah. I mean, that's another story. So, I mean, the more analogies people have to see it as a conceptual structure, I think the more easy it is for them to. I mean, the remedy will work regardless. Obviously, the more you work with it, the better it will work, and the more you throw at it in terms of intent, the better it'll work as well. And the more ancillary practices you have, brilliant. Yeah? This is
Right.
all it all plays into it. But you know, the more I talk about the substance, the more I see its part in the whole picture and like where it can be used. And it's you know, I've seen a lot of the positive intention crew, you know, that crew are like, okay, we'll just set a different intent, and it works. But if, for my money, it never works quite as well as it should. And I think this is because we're trying to layer something on top of an existing, we're trying to install something on top of a previous installation. So it's like, it works, but it's still in conflict with a previous operating system. So, you know,
Yeah,
if we grind it down,
one of my teachers calls it a veneer of pristine cleanliness
yes,
that
yes,
covers up this like seething
yes.
bog.
Yes.
You can't paint over that. It's not
Yes.
going to work
Or
for
you
long.
can, but it's going to start to bubble onto your screen sooner or later.
I
Yes.
know. Oh no,
I mean,
there
this
are
is where
great
karma burn's
energies
very
involved for
useful. I
that.
mean, it goes,
I mean,
you know, each
the
time.
other, can I, sorry, I just want to
Yep,
interrupt you
yep.
for a second. There's another part of that which I think is important because one of the things that we work with at the school is this idea that, you know, it's not, you know, if you're engaging life, you're engaging a window of life, okay? Every moment in life, because life is polarized. I mean, you
Mm,
can't have physicality without polarization. It doesn't
sure.
exist. So you can't have a focus on positive intent without so-called negative experiences coming into balance as well, because the whole window
Sure.
is there to be experienced. So for people that are possibly focused on so-called positive
Mm,
energies, are going to just set themselves up often for a swing. And I
mm,
think that, I know, in alchemy, as you're burning off and you're moving up, you have to come back into the swing of the opposite
mm,
side in
mm,
order to move into a
mm,
non-polarized state, which
mm,
takes you
mm,
up into the higher frequencies.
mm,
This is what people call non-dual or
mm,
unpolarized states. You can't be
mm,
focused on positivity
mm,
and totally ignoring the negative stuff,
mm.
without and expect to move anywhere.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah. You see, I mean, can I just say something here around the negative stuff? A lot of that negative stuff is, people, for example, with anger, people think, oh, one shouldn't be angry. This is just an unrealistic state to be in. I mean, anger is in itself is a pure state. I mean, for me, anger represents if I really need to get something done and I get angry, generally it gets done. That it represents a very powerful force which can be used for good or bad, obviously, but to deny its existence or try to suppress it, even worse, is it's just not realistic. So it's to come to terms with, yes, I mean, you know, sometimes we even use the terminology, yeah, I work like a demon. It's like that frenetic, mad, crazy working to the exclusion of everything else. Sometimes this is a useful state to be happy with one's demonic as well as one's angelic aspects, to integrate both of them and to realize, yes, one is a cat, a dog, a demon, an angel, a jealous god, a rock star, the pauper in the street. All of these things are aspects of your nature, and to be comfortable with all of them. Once you're comfortable with all of them, you can't suffer.
That's
Wherever
very
you are, you
tantric,
will not
isn't
suffer.
it?
It's very tantric, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a transformation process, yes, but it's the extension of. I mean, it's the purpose of the non-dual state is to like not distinguish between any aspects of your reality. It's saying they're all pure and being comfortable with all of them and realizing that you're not complete until you've integrated all of them. So it's that process
I
of
know
the
enlightenment
reintegration
is
is
not
huge.
always a sociable experience.
No, which is why they advise people to go to caves. Yeah. Traditionally, caves and forests away from people. There's a
Right,
quote
don't go to
from
too many tea parties when you're on the journey.
no, it can get quite ugly, yeah. So they say yes, forests, isolated places, caves. Now these are hard to find. So I mean, in this day and age, we have to do it in between the social interactions where we're normally used to. But it's important if one's in the middle of that, for me, just to find a safe space, a place where you can actually scream and shout if that's what's required, or just behave a bit strangely to the outside world and not be judged for it. Because if you don't have that space, then it'll potentially lock you back into this, which is why they advocate forests, caves, isolated places. Because there's something called the cordon Rushan, which is the playing out the six realms. So behaving like a madman, like a dog, crawling around, screaming, howling, doing all these things, which is one of the practices in Dzogchen, the Great Perfection. And they actually advise you doing this, obviously away from your family, clearly, friends as well. I mean, just social environments, places where they know you, so you can actually be free to just play all this stuff out. Now, a lot of the stuff people play out these days in groups, encounter groups or processing groups, they're given the space and the environment to like scream and shout and wail and cry and do whatever they need to do, which is the value of that. And I mean, this is how it all plays in. We've almost created a safe space. We've almost declared a certain workshop a safe space for people to play the stuff out. And it's very important. I mean, whether it means you've got to scream into your pillow or go underwater in the pool and scream your lungs out. I mean, there are places you can do this, but obviously the more clean the place is, the better. I mean, the nice thing about calm and burn is like whatever methodology you're a part of, or whatever your previous learning, teaching space that you're coming from, it'll add as an ancillary thing. It'll add as an aid to facilitate that process, which is why we're looking at it in relation to a lot of therapies and saying, well, like, do it in conjunction with your therapy. It'll just make it deeper and stronger. It's not like there's any shortage of work to be done when it comes to enlightenment. As you know, it's a long, hard slog, and the more stuff you've got on your side, the better you are, because it's the ego will tend to reform itself in the process, and as it this is, I mean, probably one of my favorite quotes about enlightenment is like, cross quickly to the island of jewels. Now, everyone like thinks, I like cross to the island of jewels. Now, forget about the quickly. The quickly is the most important part in that sentence because as one's crossing to the island of jewels, the ego is attempting to reform itself. And the more quickly you can propel yourself through that space, the more quickly you get to the island of jewels. But that acceleration is important, and that sense of like, well, if I'm moving fast enough, I mean, the next product we're coming out with, the All Victorious Confidence, which was bottle 3 in Wealth in the Bottle, the motif I use there is flying so fast, the mud just flies off your wings as you go. So to propel the person so quickly into that state, that all victorious space, this is, the next product we're developing to work with the karma burn, to actually move people from the state where now we've sandblasted the room, now we're ready to repaint it, but we don't want to get caught in like, you know, redoodling on the wall and making a mess of it again before we can actually put a nice clean finish on it.
Right, now that you've finished with the graveyard and the whatever,
That's it.
apply for the
Yes.
sun.
Yes, yes.
Go for the sun.
Here your wings.
We'll meet you in
your,
there and help you,
your
with the
strap on
next
wings.
formation. So listen, we're at the top of the hour and
Oh.
I'm going to have to go. But thank you so much.
So we freeze up there. Okay. So
Oh,
we're good.
I was just saying, yes, I'm going to have to close up for this one.
Mm, mm,
But
mm,
there's obviously more adventures ahead and lots to say.
mm.
But thank you for an amazing, rich, first of all, offering to the world. I'm just so excited to kind of be in this collaborative community.
That's great.
Um, but we'll be in touch again soon.
Absolutely, yes. And good luck to all the karma burners.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Okay,
Bye.
Amanda. Bye bye.
Bye.